Now, the Democratic Alliance is heading to the North Gauteng High Court today to challenge the new quotas for employment equity. The DA argues that the new quotas will cut hundreds of thousands of South Africans out of employment. The National Employers Association of South Africa are also adding their voice to the opposition of the new Employment Equity Amendment Act and its regulations, while Labour Federation COSATU says it's dismayed by the DA's stance. So let's have a conversation, and we're joined now by the CEO of the National Employers Association of South Africa, Gerhard Papenfus, and also COSATU Parliamentary Coordinator Matthew Parks. Great to have both of you. Thank you very, very much for your time.
Hello, Leanne. Hello, Matthew.
All right, so Gerhard, let me begin with you, because you've added your voice now to the DA. I'm not going to reiterate what they are putting before the courts. But if we look at what you're calling this, you're calling the quotas draconian and anti-growth. But if we look at some of the facts, and the facts basically saying, Stats SA's latest quarterly labour force survey shows black South Africans make up over 80% of the working age population, yet hold less than 15% of top management posts. How do we justify your position when stats, the reality on the ground is like that?
Leanne, yeah, thank you. Well, not only do we add our voice to them, we are also on our way to court. We are lodging an urgent application, and we will also lodge an application that will eventually end up in the Constitutional Court. So that is true, but you can't fix it. It's unfortunate, but you can't fix it in the manner they want to do it. They want to fix this thing in 5 years. They say they want an employer to sit in front of his computer, open his spreadsheet, and then fill in the blanks with people based on race and gender. And so that in 5 years' time, he will have an outcome which the state desires. In other words, equality of outcomes. Just fill in the names, put in the people, but that defies all the dynamics of business. You see, the state has done that. The state fully complies in terms of all these things. I think they're over-complying. And so the SOEs, but all of these institutions is almost non-existent. They exist in terms of bodies, but they're non-existent in terms of execution of their services. To build a business takes more and requires much more than just filling positions with people that comply in terms of color and gender. That takes more, and you cannot interfere in a world where a businessman pays the employee, takes the risk fully. And if the state fails, he recovers money with taxes, and if the SOEs fails, then they get bailouts paid by business people's taxes that employs people, business people's taxes. But they get, if SOEs, all the SOEs that's currently in existence, was it for bailouts, they all would have been out of business. And so is the state.
Yeah.
But business works on a different formula, and we can only appoint on merit and not in any way take color of a person's skin into consideration. So this is not I don't want to employ a certain person of a particular color. I say, no, I will not take into consideration color when I employ.
All right, I'm going to come back to you, but I want to bring Matthew into this conversation. So quite a few points raised from Gerhard in this, Matthews, but and one of the big ones, of course, is basically box ticking over merit. And I think, to summarize very much so what Gerhard is saying, is pretty much so that. So how do we go about balancing the need for redress with the risk of unintended consequences, like tokenism or further division in workplaces? Because this is a reality.
Good morning. Thanks for having us. Look, I don't think the issues are exclusive. I think number one is to recognize where we come from. 3.5 centuries of deliberate institutional racial gerrymandering, that black people, colored people, Indian people, women were denied opportunities. That is a fact of law, as a fact of history. And as a consequence, you look at the Stats SA report, you look at the Commission for Employment Equity report, it shows you that in the private sector, over 55%, 60% in the banking sector, the retail sector, the mining sector, the insurance sector. All of those positions at the top management are held by white men. So over 60%. Yet white men, like Gerhard and myself, constitute about 4% of society. That's not a sustainable indicator of 31 years into democracy. The very reason why government has got to put in place laws in response to the demands of society, because we do live in a democracy, the views of society must carry through, is because the private sector has simply failed, because employers have simply failed. And I think let's demystify the employment equity targets. For 30 years, it was basically a call to employers to try to embrace non-racialism, to allow all employees, black and white, the full opportunity of meeting the potential. And I think if you look at the stats, 30 years into democracy, we have not made significant progress in that regard. So the targets, the amendments in the 2023 Act are very modest, to be honest. It says over 5 years, can you try to move from 5% of African women to 10%, from 4% of colored women to 3% to 7%. They're very modest targets. You look at them. If you look at the targets, none of them equals 100%. So it's a myth to say a single person will lose their job. They won't. But they're just saying, can you make some progress? It's not expecting over 5 years that all of a sudden workforces will be 100% reflective of society, but we do need to see some progress, and albeit it's very modest progress. Also, the thing is not rigid as the DA and others would like to falsely claim. If, for instance, an employee can't find a nuclear scientist who's of Indian woman, for example, it's fine. There's provisions in the Act and the regulations that say if you can't meet a person this demographic target, there's 7 options. You can indicate why you couldn't do so. You could indicate I've advertised, no one has that skills who applied, etc. That's fine. The law is not rigid. It's just simply saying, can we do a bit better? Can we change the culture of society? But I also would hope to say that the argument of Nyasa colleagues that the reason why the state's in a crisis is because we've appointed black people, I hope that's not what they're saying, because that's a very dangerous argument to make. And I really would want to assume that's not what they intended to say, because that would be most unfortunate. But the bottom line is, employment equity covers everybody. It includes white people, by the way, for example. So myself as an employee, COSATU, I'm including, COSATU's got an obligation to make sure they've got sufficient white men, sufficient white women, etc. So it's different than broad-based black economic empowerment, which is more specific. Employment equity just simply says, can all workforces, public and private, make effort to reflect the demographic diversity of South Africa. Also, one of the positive things, Leanne, in the 2023 amendments is to say, let's elevate regional demographics as well, because the demographics of the Western Cape, for example, is very different from that of Limpopo, which is very different from that of KwaZulu-Natal. And for historical reasons, it's fine. But it helps to be more inclusive, helps to give us more space for employees to be more agile. The other critical amendment, Leanne, is that SMEs, who I think is the majority of NIAS's body, those who employ 50 and less, are exempt from having to submit annual reports to ease the burden on a restaurant owner or on a corner shop who doesn't have a significant HR to do all the reporting. So trying to ease a little bit on the pressure from the business side. And then maybe lastly, Leanne, one of the positive things too is to say that if you want to do business with the state, you should have a compliance certificate that you as an employer are in compliance with the Employment Equity Act, the Minimum Wage Act. And this is a wonderful thing, trying to incentivize good behavior, to encourage those employers who embrace the law, who embrace progressive labor practices, and of course to discourage those who choose not to do so.
Okay.
But I think it's trying to respond positively, and I think that's why many businesses, in fact, have actually said they embrace this, because I think this is a fair and it's a common sense compromise.
So, Gerhard, let me come back to you now, because I imagine you have a lot to say about this, but I want to try and keep this focused in terms of some of the utterances that have been made, and particularly with regard to the DA, making statements that something like this is going to cost South Africa hundreds of thousands of jobs. Is there any evidence that this is going to in fact cost hundreds of thousands of jobs? How is it by putting this in place, making it work properly and efficiently, that this will cost the jobs? Do we have any facts that we can talk to these claims?
Leanne, when you decide as a young person to become an entrepreneur, one of the reasons you do that is because there's this entrepreneurial drive there, this free spirit, that you want to go and do your thing in the manner you want to do it. You want to grow a business in the manner you want. your unique way, and you want to employ the people that you want. That's crucial, because business culture is perhaps the most important thing that makes business succeed. Business culture. Now, if you ask me what is business culture, I can't actually say to you. If somebody says, what's your culture? I say, no, ask somebody that observes me. He will tell you what my culture is. That is business culture, but you get places where things work. When you start tampering with that thing on the basis of race. Now, let me interrupt myself here. If you interview a person, two persons, a black person and a white person, then you don't select on the basis of race. You are a fool if you do that. You select on the basis of ability and attitude. And if you talk attitude, many of these things are subjective measurements. But it is the right of the employer to make that subjective call. Yeah. He can say, this is what I want. The moment you interfere with that, you take away that benefit of being an entrepreneur. And we say, government, do not interfere in this manner in the workplace. But please don't, because the moment you do, you are going to just make this thing very unattractive. And secondly, you're not going to go over beyond 50. Unfortunately, that 50 threshold, most probably, and that's my prediction, will be lowered at some point. Yeah. So businesses will make themselves smaller in order to stay below the 50 threshold.
So, Gerhard, let me bring you into. Let's be honest with each other, because when you are sitting and you're interviewing people for a job, it doesn't matter. Honestly, it doesn't matter. Inside individuals lies a bias. You're going to look at a fellow young Afrikaans male, and you are going to see the culture of your company within this young Afrikaans male, as opposed to having a young, qualified black male sitting in front of you, or a black woman. And this, unfortunately, is human nature. And if there isn't a law to govern something like this, how are you ever going to change the trajectory of the face of business in South Africa?
Okay, my head of media, I'm talking about my organization, is a black lady. She's appointed on merit. At my head office, lawyers, black. In some of my offices, the majority of people are not white. How did they get there? Purely on merit. Purely on merit. So if I see a person and I see the qualities in that person, I will appoint, because I'm stupid if I don't do that. I cannot let good quality go. But I'm not going to sit with a spreadsheet and say, you know what, I'm going to take the second best. If the best person is white, unfortunately, I'm going to take that white person. I tell you why. If you want me to take the second best, then I'll tell you, congratulations, you've got the job. But I just want to remind you, you were actually second best. It is a disservice to that person. And I will always remember, always, this person wasn't good enough. Now, I just want to take you back to something else. When an employer employs something without the South African labor law, you take a risk. There's a huge risk involved in employment. And if you don't employ the best, the risk increased, and you take the risk. The state doesn't step in and say, you know what, we established a law in terms of which you were supposed to take, in some cases, second best, but we'll stand in for you. We'll cover you. No, it's my risk. It is my company. It is the future of my business. Therefore, I say just go for merit. Grow the economy. Fill the market with good quality employees. Jack up the school system, the universities. Deliver people into the market that arrive in the market with no sense of entitlement. That a person that can give everything for your job. And there's another thing that worries us. You know what? I've employed black people. You know what? They are picked up. You cannot believe. We render lawyers, we render services to big companies. You know, you wake up one morning and you've lost him. They bought him. That's a problem. But I tell you, a good employer, a wise businessman will always employ the best. And the best, you find them in all races. What I'm fighting is for, do not want to follow a spreadsheet approach and appoint not on merit.
I'm not sure, Gerhard, what you meant by that, but it's fine. I'm gonna let that one stand because I need to bring Matthew into it and we don't have time. It's very difficult in terms of understanding how transformation would work if it is you hire who you want to hire. And Matthew, just perhaps wrap this up for me on your side. How do we go about this? I mean, you've heard what Gerhard has to say. Merit, as opposed to anything else, is what the preference should be. Talk to us. Why hasn't it been working to date? Why has it been so low? And what needs to change?
Yeah. Look, I think we must always stick to the fundamental facts. And if you look at the Stats SA reports, Employment Equity Commission reports, it just shows you 55, 60% plus of certain positions in the private sector untransformed. And, for 30 years, we relied upon voluntary commitment to non-racialism, to creating an equal opportunity society, so to speak. And many employers, not all, but many have simply failed. So this is just simply empowering the minister to say, look, we've gone this road for 30 years. We need to do a little bit better. Here's a very initial, modest nudge in the right direction. No one is saying you don't take the best person, but simply saying you have a black person and a white candidate. Both are strong. Take the black person if your target says you're shortage of black people in that company. But also can equally say, if you're a shortage of having white people, you must also then appoint white people. So employment equity includes every single South African, black and white, male and female, person with disabilities, person without disabilities. But the fact is, if you look, for example, at people with disabilities, which is about 8 to 10% of society, most workplaces don't even have 1% of the staff being people with disabilities. So if we don't nudge employees in the right direction, then we're going to continue to remain the most unequal society in the world. We can't leave everything simply to the call of employers because some employers simply cannot embrace a non-racial society. If we want to grow the economy, we need to make sure every single South African has the opportunity to earn a decent wage, to have a job, to buy the goods the economy produces. But if we continue to be a society where the top high-paying jobs are for white-only people in reality, and the bottom jobs are for African and coloured, largely women people in reality, then we're going to remain the most unequal society in the world, and that's going to create a distorted economy because people who are paid poorly can't afford to buy the goods this society requires. But if Gerhard says he embraces this vision, then why is he having a heart attack? Because the law just simply says embrace a non-racial concept, give everybody equal opportunity, including black people. If that's the case, then there should be no problem. But the reality shows us that many employers are simply refusing to change, and hence the state is required to nudge them in the right direction.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. Thanks for talking to us. It's a big debate. It's an issue that is going to be tackled by the courts this afternoon. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Gerhard Papenfus, who is the CEO of the National Employers Association of SA, and Matthew Parks, the COSATU Parliamentary Coordinator, speaking about Employment Equity Amendment Act.